given the right set of circumstances, pretty much anybody could end up in a situation that is cultic or manipulative, or I mean, the military. Think of all the things that people do in the military.
Oh yeah,
they didn't, join the army to burn villagers in Vietnam, but they did. So what happened? They got psychologically programmed to a place where they were willing to do that. But you can't, and guys do have a hard time. They can't come back from that. They have a hard time being able to forgive themselves for what happened. If they can unpack it and understand
and it's also so similar too. If you think about, especially if you want to go back to the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, the type of people that signed up to do that, they were young kids that were not like growing up saying, I want to grow up and I want to go into combat and I want to fight for America and I want to go to war. Like, this was not something that was like in their DNA. It wasn't a calling that they had, right? These people were and I've talked to a lot of them, these combat veterans. They were really young. They didn't know what direction they wanted to go in life. They maybe had a few options on the table. Maybe I'll go to college. Maybe I'll try to get a job doing this, learn a trade or whatever. Or maybe I could go sign up for the military and I can go off to war. And for one reason or another, they picked war. And their brains were not built for that. Yeah. They were not psychologically ready to witness that kind of stuff and be in combat, pulling the trigger, killing people, killing kids. And they come back and there's nothing left for them. And they're broken when they get back here.
I actually think that it's interesting because Bob, the fellow at Meadowhaven, he had suggested early on, I knew very little about trauma. It was like maybe 1994, 95. And I was once I got a little cult education in me, then I realized what kind of challenges my kids were up against, and I was getting a little freaked out. Like, trauma changes your brain. I mean, these kids grew up, even if you left the sex stuff out, it was still a traumatic situation. People had way too much power over their lives. And it was, abusive. There's no question about it. So
what could be more abusive than sexual abuse? I don't know.
No, it was probably not. Sex gets right into the core of our being.
Right, so, exactly.
And that, especially for a kid who has no mental equipment to deal with that.
Right.
But my point is just that if soldiers coming back from, I'm not sure if it was in Rebecca's book where they talk about moral injury, where you're it's not that you just experienced horrible stuff, your friends getting blown up and this and that. It's that you pulled the trigger, that you did something that you knew deep down on some level, you killed a young boy. Yeah, exactly. And it's I think a piece of he gave me a book to read, Trauma and Healing by Judith Herman. It was one of the earliest books written on trauma. And I was surprised to find out it was only 1980 they came up with the term trauma related to Vietnam vets. It was their rap sessions where they started to unpack what had happened to them, and they began to realize they came up with the term trauma for it. At the same time, the women's liberation movement was coming up with all the stories of women who had been subject to all kinds of abuse, and they were traumatized. And then they started to put two and two together and realize this is a kind of a constant in human history and human experience, that when you get traumatized, you have to somehow go back and revisit how this happened, confess to whatever weakness you might have had in the situation, but also absolve yourself that, look, something happened to you, man. You didn't dream this up. This is not your fault. It's you can't not take any responsibility for it. It's good that you take responsibility for it. Nobody should walk away after war without some issues, but you have to get to a place where you can let go. You can get that trauma to a healed place. I hope that message gets out more and more. The psychological research on trauma is just flooding the world today.
What is the best way to do it? What is the best way to face it?
Well,
and to work through it.
In my opinion, well, from a cultic point of view, it was this educational piece of how did these small decisions along the way, which in their own, this choice wasn't all that bad, this choice wasn't all that bad, this choice, but all of a sudden, holy shit, where are we? And that's I think pretty much what happens to soldiers too. They get caught up in this weird world. I just visited an old friend. He went to Vietnam when he was 16, lied about his age.
Wow, because he wanted to go?
He wanted to go. He came home in, rough shape, full disability. It's he still struggles with it. It still will come to him, even though he's done a lot of work to try and process it all. He still carries it. When he talks about it, you can see it in his face. It's real, and it's still a burden for him. Thank God he's learned how to live beyond that. But yeah, I mean, I hope that's why I got involved with Meadowhaven for so long, was because I thought it did a good job of trying to give people a chance to unpack it, rather than just shove it down and forget about it, and it's going to pop up somewhere at an unfortunate moment.
Can you spot this kind of stuff, like in other parts of society, where cultish behaviors bubbling up, and you
in the religious world, it's becoming more and more widely well known how much abuse goes on in churches, not just sexual abuse,
historically.
But, the manipulation to get people to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right. I mean, there's nothing. It's crazy that there's nothing else that's more synonymous with child abuse than the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And cults that use that stuff.
Yeah. And now it's coming out, it's not just the Catholics. It's pretty much every doggone denomination has a closet full. But it is something that, especially now, because people are you familiar with the term deconstruction in the evangelical world?
No.
Well, there's, I don't know the statistics, but a pretty large percentage of our society over the last 20, 30 years was evangelical, witness our political situation. But
a large say that again?
American society, I think maybe 20 or 30% are Catholic, 20 or 30% are mainstream Protestants, 20 or 30% are charismatic and evangelical and, fundamentalist.